friends, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited you're here today because I'll be talking about my October wrap-up. Oh my gosh, what an epic reading month. I ended up reading like 26 books. It's ridiculous. I did do a recent reads video as well in the middle of the month. I will link that in the cards in the description box, but let's get right into it and let's talk about Halloweekend Readathon. You guys know I was a co-host for that and I had so much fun hanging out with everybody, hanging out with the other co-host, and Lexi, just planning the most epic freaking readathon ever. I didn't make it till 5 a.m. on the sleepover, but I made it until like 2-ish, which is late for Katrina, very late for me, and I think I had to be up at like 8 the next morning. So it was a wild weekend. Anyways, I really appreciate anybody who was in the chat or watched sprints or, you know, read a book. Anybody who read a book this month, I really appreciate it. Anybody who participated, I appreciate it, and I had so much fun just like hanging out with everybody every weekend. It felt very special to me in my Halloween heart, and I hope everybody had an excellent Halloween and had a great Halloweekend readathon. So the first book I ended up reading for Halloweekend was Hexed by Thomas Olde Helvoet. This is about a town that has a witch problem. This town basically has this witch just like kind of around, and they've dealt with it and they've kept it a secret, and they actually have built like a social media thing to keep track of her called Hex, and you know, some stuff goes down and it's not normal and it gets pretty wild and crazy. This is kind of like a small town that has a secret situation that I do like, but the ending, I was like, okay, I need a little bit more from the ending, but there is a sequel. It just hasn't been translated yet. So I ended up giving Hex 4.5 stars. I really like witch books where it gives you like the whole backstory, and I really liked that about this. I liked the history of it, and I liked like the lore of Hex. The next book I ended up reading for the readathon was The Heart by David Sodergren. This is for the novella prompt, and I absolutely love this. It's a creature feature. This is about a woman who is kind of dealing with like a golf rich American golf people that want to like buy her land, and is buying all of her land in this small fishing town, and she stumbles upon a creature, and that's all I'm going to say about this because it is a novella and it's amazing. But I did end up giving it 4 stars because there is a part of this that kind of drags for me. I didn't need so much of it, but overall I had a great time. It's a David Sodergren book. I always have a good time. The next book I ended up reading was Undead Girl King by Lily Anderson. This was for our new to me author. This is a YA book about a girl that raises the dead to solve a like serial killer thing. Her friend is killed by a serial killer, and she ends up raising her but 2 other girls that she doesn't necessarily get along with, and they kind of have to solve the mystery while figuring out being dead. This book was really funny, but there was some drama because it is a YA with young girls, and I don't like reading cattiness and stuff like that. It just kind of annoys me in books. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. Lots of funny moments in this. This is like a horror comedy book. Next book I ended up reading, I absolutely loved, was Slewfoot by Brom. I read this for host fave. This was Erin's favorite, and it was so magical and vicious and gross, and I loved it so much. This is another witch story, and it takes place in, I don't know why I'm laughing. It takes place in the 1600s, which is hilarious. I don't know if you guys ever heard about the 1600s. It's a very funny time in, you know, New England's history. They had these little things called like witch trials. I don't know if you ever heard of that. But basically this kind of happens in this, but it's done in a very different way. You're introduced to some magical characters, and you know, you're really rooting for them. I ended up giving this one 5 stars, and it is a witch book. It is such a great October read. I don't know why I'm doing this with my hand. It's just so good. I loved the main character a ton. Abatha is one of my new favorite characters, and highly, highly recommend Slewfoot if you haven't read it yet. So the next book I ended up reading was The Fisherman by John Langan. This is, I read for my favorite subgenre, and I absolutely loved it. It is cosmic horror. It's not going to be for everybody, but the ending is so, so, so good. I absolutely loved it, and there's very little I can say about this book to not give it away, because it's very, very weird. If you guys hear construction, I am so, so sorry. I was trying to film this before it started up again, but I might just play spooky music or something right now. But I am almost done with Halloweekend Readathon Reads The Switch House by Tim Meyer. I ended up reading on Kindle Unlimited, and I really liked this one as well because of the author's note. The author's note actually moved it up like another star for me. But again, this is a very short book. I think it's 120 pages, so I don't really want to talk about it too much, and I talked about it in my reading vlog. But this is about a couple that ends up going on one of those reality TV shows and switching houses, and they come home and realize their house was cursed by the woman that was on the reality show, and you're kind of given all the clues to what happened, and then there's like 2 epilogues, right? Yes, so I ended up giving this one 4 stars and highly recommend. The next book I ended up reading was Joplin's Ghost by Tana and Reeve Du. This was for genre blend, so this is supernatural with historical fiction. This is about Scott Joplin's ghost, kind of, I don't want to say getting confused, but he thinks this woman who is also a musician is like his wife, and it gets a bit spicy. I listened to this one on Scribd, and I highly recommend it, especially if you are a fan of jazz or just music in general. I feel like the music was done really well in this stuff, not being like a huge jazz person. It made me go listen to Scott Joplin, and I am so happy I did, but I really like this. It did drag a bit because you get a lot of POVs in this, but I ended up giving it 4 stars and highly recommend this one as well. And then of course I read Books of Blood, only volumes 1 and 2 and a couple stories from 3, but I got stuck on a story and never picked it back up. So my favorite stories in this, I think Rawhead Rex is my favorite because that was like one of the last good ones that I read, but the new Murders in Rue Morgue, what the actual F was Clive Barker thinking when he did that? I know it's kind of like a homage to Poe, but it felt like so crazy and weird, and the ending was so good. But anyways, I absolutely loved volumes 1 and 2. I'm thinking like definitely like 4 stars for 1, maybe 5 stars for 2. I don't know, because there's some crazy stories in volume 2. But highly recommend Books of Blood by Clive Barker if you have not read at least volume 1. I highly recommend it. It's a good time, and there's a bunch of stuff based on these, like the movies and stuff. Like Rawhead Rex, I actually watched the movie of this month for the first time, and I wasn't too impressed, but you get like a lot more from the actual short story of it. You get Rawhead Rex's past, shall we say, and I was also thinking about David Sodergren's Nightblood, or is it Nightblood or Night Shoot? Night Shoot. His inspiration might have come from Rawhead Rex, or it just exists in the same little world, maybe, possibly. And the last book I ended up reading for Halloweekend Readathon was Kill Your Pumpkins by Judith Sonnet. This is a little tiny novella of short stories that are quite meta, and it was super fun, and it takes place on Halloween. I read it, I believe, the Saturday before Halloween while I was at my boring job, and it was fantastic. I had so much fun with this one. This one is not as extreme as Judith Sonnet's other books that are extreme horror. This one is the most mild. It's still very gory, especially the first 2 stories, and the last story is so much fun though. But I highly suggest this one. It's on ebook, and it's such a good time. Okay, so it is many hours later, but I'm gonna finish this wrap up today because it's the only day I can do it. the construction was very loud. So that is why I stopped for hours, and it still might be loud. Who knows? It is very much later. It's like 5:30 now. Anyways, I believe I finished talking about all of the Halloweekend Readathon books I ended up reading, and talking about how much fun I had and all that jazz. So let's get into the Blackoween Readathon books that I read. That was hosted by Bree from the Locked Booktician, and I will link her channel in the description box down below. And yeah, let's get right into it. So I ended up reading Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. I listened to this on Libby, and this is one of Michelle's favorite books, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's very dark. This is about two friends, and one of her friends ends up going missing, and it's like, you know, people care, but they also like don't care. It takes place in Washington, D.C., I believe, in the early 2000s, or like 2010s or something, and it's really sad. It's a really sad book. The reveal in this is so depressing, but I thought it was done very well, and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I took off half a star because there's a lot of Simpson hate in this book for some reason. The next book I ended up reading for Blackoween Readathon was House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. I really enjoyed this one as well. It's a new release. I liked Year of the Witching too, but this is kind of like a fun fantasy, dark fantasy, vampire Elizabeth Bathory situation. I feel like the world was really easily explained. It was great imagery. Like usually you saw everything everybody was wearing. The attention to detail in this was done very well, but I will say it felt a bit Game of Thronesy with the food descriptions in it. It made me so hungry, and also I feel like it dragged a bit at the beginning. I wanted more Elizabeth Bathory time, but overall I still really enjoyed it and highly recommend it, and I gave it 4 stars. And the next book I ended up reading for Blackoween Readathon was His Pain by Rath James White. This is a little novella, and I read this for underrated author. This is an extreme horror book about a guy that is born with pain. He feels pain, a breeze going by, clothes touching his skin. He feels pain, and he's felt this pain his entire life since he was born. And it picks up with him, well, it starts off with him being born, and then it picks up with him being 17, and his mom reaches out to like a yogi guy about meditation and to see if he can come and like cure her son, and that's all I can say about this one. It's so gross. There's a lot of gross stuff that happens in this. What do you expect, right? With extreme horror. I really liked it though. I think this is my favorite Rath James White book. I think I gave it 5 stars. I have to go back to my notes. I just really enjoyed what this book had to say, I guess. Or I had a good time with it. But yeah, you know, going into extreme horror is always protect yourself. But yeah, life is pain, and I think this book reflected that really well. Alright, so now into like just the random horror books that I ended up reading this month. I ended up listening to Decorum at the Deathbed by Josh Mallerman. This was like a really quick listen on Audible. I think it was free, and it's about a woman who is jogging, and she's just thinking, like, she's thinking about her husband, who she's the main caretaker for, and how much of a burden he is, you know. You know, when you do that. And it takes place on Halloween, and I did not care for this. I liked the beginning a lot. It was really intriguing because I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but the ending felt so flat. I was like, seriously, I think it should have been a bigger ending. It was like a very like flat ending, if that makes any sense. It's a very short list. I think it was like 30 minutes or something, and I think I I gave it 2 stars. The next book I ended up listening to is Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Of course, I always listen to this in October every year, and it's just so much fun. You can find the audio on YouTube or Scribd. I think I listened to it on Scribd, and it's just a lot of fun. I like to watch the animation as well with the Ichabod Crane and the Toad Hall animation on Disney every year. It's just fun. Ichabod is a coward. He is an unlikable main character, let's just say that. But I always have a blast with it. And then I've read 3 of the Small Spaces books this month, and I read these because Kaylee from Kaylee's Books loved, I know she loved Small Spaces, but I don't know if she's read Dark Water. No, I don't know if she's read Dead Voices yet, but I'm a weirdo, and I read like almost all of these. I'm going to read Empty Smiles very soon too, but I had so much fun with these. This is great. So Small Spaces, the first one is these kids go on a field trip. Well, after like she finds like a book this woman was trying to get rid of, and she's reading this book, and so it's like a book within a book, and she goes on this field trip, and their whole class like ends up getting stuck in a cornfield on a bus, and there's creepy scarecrows, and they go into like another world, and it's just so great. I have goosebumps thinking about this story because the setup for it in this first book was executed so well, and I love the character a lot. There's a lot of homages to this. It felt like there's homages to Wizard of Oz in it, and Neverending Story. There's definitely some imagery in that, and the friendships are very, very cute, and it's just a fun, spooky middle grade happening in this. And then Dead Voices, there is a very scary thing. Oh yeah, Kaylee did read this, but she never told me the scary part that really scared her in this. This one is like a very, very spooky ghost story, and then Dark Waters has some snake stuff in it that I was like, ugh, I was very uncomfortable. So if you're looking for a new spooky middle grade book series, I highly suggest Small Spaces. I believe I gave the first book 5 stars. I forget what I rated the other ones, but they're all highly, highly rated. I enjoyed them all, and they're nice little 200-page books that are nice to break up. You know, when you're reading extreme horror or something, just pick up some spooky middle grade. And to end this very chaotic wrap up, I ended up listening to The Talisman by Peter Straub and Stephen King. This is a Jake Sawyer, I can't say his name, I cannot talk anymore, story. If you don't know, he is from the Dark Tower series. He's the young boy, and this is kind of like his story. Like we follow him more because he just has like all these lives, and I was very sad at the beginning of this because I was like, I feel like he doesn't need it to go through anymore because of after reading Dark Tower. You don't have to read Dark Tower at all to read this, but it does tie in. It's the territories, it's world hopping, it's crazy, it is a homage again to Wizard of Oz. Lots of books I read this month, it seems to reflect Wizard of Oz. There is literally a villain in this that says, "I'll get you, my pretty," or something, and I was like, "And your little dog too," because we were listening to it when we went to the mountains to Dinosaur Land. If you saw that vlog, Alex and I were listening to this, and yeah, it was a blast. It is a journey, but I will say, reading this after reading Fairy Tale made this one not seem as special, if that makes any sense. This didn't have, I feel like, the urgency that Fairy Tale did, which is so strange. I was talking about it on Sprints that Peter Straub died the day Fairy Tale came out, and this is like the Fairy Tale story that Stephen King wrote with his friend Peter Straub. Anyways, doesn't make any sense, but just weird. And I really thought about a rating for this. I think I'm leaning towards like a 3.5 or like a 4 for it, because yeah, it didn't hit as hard as Fairy Tale did, which I don't know if that makes any sense to compare them in any way. But anyways, I do suggest this. If you are a constant reader and you haven't read The Talisman, you have to read The Talisman because it has a lot of Dark Tower stuff in it and territory stuff, but if you're not into fantasy, do not read it. Alright, so that is it. That was my insanely chaotic October wrap-up. Let me know what your favorite books were that you read in October, or did you join any sprints? Did you do anything for a Halloweekend Readathon, or what was a fun fall activity that you ended up doing? And I hope you guys have a great day. Bye!